Hello, my name is Elaine Evans. I am an extension educator at the University of Minnesota, and I am talking to you about gardening for pollinators. Pollinators are important for a lot of different reasons. The first one that often comes to mind is their impact on our food. So it's about 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat that can be traced back to animal pollinators. But in addition to that, these pollinators are in general just out there pollinating over 80% of plants that are dependent on them. And so you can imagine all of the things that are connected to those plants. The vast majority of flowering plants are dependent on animal pollination, and then those plants are feeding countless other creatures, and the creatures that those eat those creatures. Those plants are really important for soil and water health. So it zooms out to this big picture of our ecosystem really being dependent on having healthy and diverse pollinator populations. In Minnesota, I want you to take a guess in your head. Try to think of how many different kinds of bees there might be in Minnesota. We're still figuring out the exact number, but it looks like there are close to at least 470 different species. We're still actually finding new ones every year as more surveys are being done. So there's a lot of different shapes, sizes, colors. You may be familiar with something like bumblebees, but there are all of these other different kinds of bees out there interacting with flowers, pollinating, and doing all kinds of things in our garden. A lot of times people wonder how pollinators are doing. So when asking, are they in decline or are they fine? Bumblebees are one of the groups we know about. Most of the bees, we don't actually know how they're doing. But for bumblebees, the news isn't great, where 1 out of 3 species of bumblebees are in decline. One that we have in Minnesota, we're lucky to still have them here, is the rusty patch bumblebee, which was once common but is now facing extinction. Are honeybees at risk of extinction? You may have heard about honeybees having problems, and it is true, but they are actually not in decline. They do have health problems, but beekeepers are able to raise more bees, so we're not worried about honeybees going extinct, but they do still need attention in terms of being able to keep colonies healthy. What's causing the decline is a combination of a lot of different factors. At the center here, we have habitat loss and poor nutrition. But connected to those are pesticides, pathogens, parasites, climate change. And there's a lot of interactions between these where things like habitat loss can actually compound the damage done by pesticides when bees don't have proper nutrition that could help them detoxify from pesticides. So that habitat loss is where gardening can really come into play, where you have a chance to really help bolster what's available to bees and other pollinators to help them. I'm going to next go over 4 actions to help pollinators, and these are all things you can do in your garden and beyond. The first is to plant flowers. There are tons of options for flowers that pollinators will use. One of the things you can do is to just observe flowers that you see and see which ones are popular with bees, not only with the number of bees, but with the different types of bees that you see there. It's important to also prioritize plants that are blooming in the early spring or the fall, as those are times when resources can be more scarce. You want to have flowers that are blooming throughout the season. So here in Minnesota, we're looking at April through September. And don't just limit yourself to thinking about the flowers, the typical kind of garden flowers that we're actually showing in the picture here. But trees are a flowering plant. A lot of our early spring plants are that are providing pollen for bees are trees like maple and willow. It's important to keep these plants free of pesticides, which includes not only insecticides, but also fungicides, which can cause big problems for bees. It's also important to provide homes. We have a lot of different kinds of bees, as we've already talked about. A lot of them are nesting in the ground, and they like all kinds of different ground habitats, disturbed, undisturbed. Some of them like to have some leaves on top, some of them like bare soil. So really just having a variety of those habitats and keeping them free of pesticides. And these bees that are nesting in the ground are very gentle. You may have run into problems with yellow jackets that also nest in the ground, which are they can be aggressive sometimes, but these bees are really gentle. And if you see a group of them nesting in the ground, you don't have to worry about them causing any problems for you. Cavity nesting bees, there are another group of bees that will nest in cavities in stems and logs. So just if you're cutting back perennials, if you leave an 8-inch stem on the plants, 8 to 12 inches, that can help. Also just putting some logs or stumps in your yard. Bumblebees are a little different, so they will use just kind of undisturbed areas. They like a cavity that has some kind of protection and some kind of insulation in it. So a lot of times if you just leave piles of dried grass or sticks in an undisturbed corner of your garden, that can be the best way to provide habitat for them. In broadening out beyond bees to just pollinators in general, the caterpillars and for butterflies and moths need all kinds of different plants. The one pictured here is a monarch butterfly, which famously is totally dependent on milkweed, but there are other butterflies that are dependent on native grasses and other kinds of plants. So again, having that diversity of native plants is going to be the best help for those pollinators. A little more detail on the stem nesting. We get a lot of questions about when people should be cleaning out their garden and cleaning out those stems. And this is giving you an idea of the annual cycle that those stem nesting bees go through. So when you're leaving flowers over the winter, those dead stalks are the ones that the bees will be using the next spring. So in the fall, leave those stems in the garden if you can. In the spring, you can cut them back to 8 to 24 inches, and bees will find those stems and nest in them. They will develop in there through the summer, hibernate there through the winter, and they won't come back till the next spring. So though you may be anxious to clean out your garden when it comes to be early April, those bees are still in there. It's best if you can wait. They'll mostly be out by early June if you can wait that long. If you can't wait that long, you can remove those stems, but just make sure you set them someplace sheltered and protected, someplace kind of out of the way where those bees can still emerge. Don't just put those stems in a compost pile or chop them up or burn them, because those bees will still be in there. One great tool, and the link for this will be in the information with this video, is this habitat assessment guide. So if you are gardening for pollinators already, or you are just starting, this is a resource where you can go through what you have in your yard, in your garden, to assess it for how you're doing for pollinators. So you can see what you're doing and what you can do to improve. If you have a project going, you can do this first, and then after you've put in your improvements, you can do it again to see how much you have helped the pollinators. The third step after planting flowers and providing homes is to take climate action. Climate change is something that is negatively impacting a lot of things. It's negatively impacting a lot of human activities, but it negatively impacts bees too. So the range shifts are happening. There's extreme weather events that are really rough on pollinators, and those are due to this human-induced climate change. So it's important that we really take this head on and do everything we can to reduce the release of greenhouse gases by using clean energy sources like solar and wind, supporting environmental regulations, plant not only trees, but also grasslands and other native plants that can have these deep root systems and can bring in the carbon from the atmosphere, growing and supporting sustainable agriculture is important, as well as supporting small local economies and businesses. The fourth thing you can do in your garden and elsewhere is to collect data. So we're learning a lot about pollinators from people, volunteers who are out there collecting information and sharing it with us. You can participate in the monarch larva monitoring project to keep track of monarchs using milkweed and other plants in your garden. You can keep track of bumblebees with Bumblebee Watch, where you just take photos of bumblebees and share them. And if you're interested in all these other bees and other pollinators, you can just do a pollinator safari by going out to your garden, taking photos of all of the animals that are visiting those flowers and sharing them on iNaturalist. One other thing you can do is to help with the backyard bumblebee count. So this is a specific time in late July, early August. It'll be different each year, the exact dates, but you can go out, and this is focused on kind of the largest population time for bumblebees. And what you can do is get out there and take photos of bumblebees and share them on iNaturalist. And this is helping us track, especially the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is that endangered species that we're really trying to figure out where they are so we can best help them recover and prevent them from going extinct. A couple quick tips if you're going to be helping to collect data. For taking photos of bumblebees and other bees, we really need a few different angles. So it helps to have multiple pictures of the same bee. If you can get a picture showing their back, showing their face from the front, and showing the whole bee from the side, that really will help us to identify those bees to that species level. If you have a macro setting, that can help you get up closer. You can also use a video setting on your phone, and that can be a way that you can get those different angles without having to take individual photos. To summarize, for helping pollinators in your gardens, plant diverse flowers to support diverse pollinators. Make sure all that pollinator food and other habitat is pesticide free, and make sure that you're leaving them some places to live. You can also take personal, social, ecological, and political action to combat climate change. And share your information with your enthusiasm and information about pollinators with others. If you're interested in becoming a pollinator educator, I suggest that you visit our Pollinator Ambassadors page and find out about our education toolkits, where you can get some training and get these resources to be able to share this information about pollinators in your communities. I'll leave it at that. There is more information on the Bee Lab website at beelab.umn.edu. You can also follow the Bee Lab on our social medias and Twitter and Facebook. And I will share some links for these things and other things down in the information for this video. So thank you for your attention. I hope you have a great gardening year and are able to really see the difference quickly when you get those pollinator plants in. The pollinators show up quickly, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of joy from seeing the wildlife that shows up and uses your gardening pollinator habitat.